Yeah, I'm a minute or two early, so I want to give everybody a chance to join. Bear with me. Ineptitudes with IT. Let's have a look. I'm hoping that I'm going to get some comments come up. Okay. I need to make sure that I'm recording this, which I'm not sure how to do. Anybody got any clips? Anybody want to tell me how I'm supposed to be recording this? Okay, I'm just going to give it another minute or two to make sure that everybody's got the chance to join. I don't want to rush anything. Okay. I'm just looking around to see if I can record it. I don't know how to do it, honestly. It's just so frustrating, my inability to use some of this technology. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same. I hope it isn't just me. I know some of you are excellent with technology, but it's not my forte. So let's see. Hellos and some comments, just so that I know we've got plenty of people watching before I launch into what I'm going to say. Okay. Hi everybody who's out there already. Please say hello. I really want to see that you can hear me and see me properly. I have no faith in my own IT abilities at all, so I assume that this is going wrong before it's even started. So if you could just comment or wave, it would be really nice. Thank you. Can I have a wave? Can I have a hello? Anything? Let's type that and see what comes up. Okay. Hi, Sasha. Thank you for that. Perfect. Hi, Gina. Oh, had an error, but now it's working. Thank you for telling me that. Because as I say, I always assume that I've done something wrong. Hi, Teresa. Hi, Jules. Oh, thank you so much. Hi, Heather. Okay, so I'm going to start. Now, I can't record this unless somebody can tell me quickly how I record it. What I will be able to do, I've lost you now. What I will be able to do, I hope, is share the PowerPoint slides with you that I have made, which will give you pointers and reminders about what we've spoken about. So it's not the end of the world that I can't record it. In fact, it might even be better because, sorry, I'm just putting my phone on Do Not Disturb. I think it might be better because I'm going to waffle, and you don't want to watch the whole hour back if half of that is me waffling. Hi, Sharon. Hello, Gemma. Facebook automatic records and saves your lives. Oh, fabulous. God, I'm glad somebody knows what they're doing. Right, let's start, shall we? So what I wanted this to be about is the human end of the assistance dog lead. So as a dog trainer, how you are going to be interacting with assistance dog users. Just very briefly, I am a dog trainer. I train dog trainers for PACT, the Professional Association of Canine Trainers. I train assistance dog trainers. I've been a trainer and assessor for dog aid, assistance and disability, for over 12 years now. I have also worked extensively as head of training for veterans with dogs, working with invisible injuries, PTSD, Hounds for Heroes, working with physical disabilities as a result of combat, that kind of thing. And I've helped people train their own dogs for years now. So I'm just going to draw on my experiences. Nothing is meant to offend anybody. And yes, there are going to be a lot of generalisations. I'm not ever referring to one particular client. I've mishmashed clients and their needs. So please don't watch it and think I'm referring to anybody in particular. Okay, so let's get started. Where do we start? Well, most of what I find people are asking me to help them with is the fact that they have a client that they're working with, or they've been approached by a client who has said, I would like to train my pet dog to do assistance tasks for me. Now, there is a big difference between a dog that is useful to you and helps you in a therapeutic nature and an actually fully qualified assistance dog. It's important to set your client's expectations, but don't worry too much about this stage as to where you think this client and this dog will end up, because it's hard to tell, it's impossible to tell. So we can talk more towards the end about actual assistance dog accreditation as opposed to a dog that's just a therapeutic aid. So you're going to be contacted, and that's your very first opportunity to gather the information that you need. Now, bear in mind, you need to be very careful how you gather the information, and also at this stage, what information are you gathering? What I wouldn't suggest you did is this full-on, lengthy application process. Ask them some real general questions that will give you a reasonable insight into what they want. What type of dog do they have? How old is this dog? What do they want this dog to do in an ideal world? And maybe their touch on their disability, but be very careful here. You just want to know if what they are asking you for is even remotely tenable. This is what this initial consultation is for. If they have a West Highland White that they want to help their £200 frame out of the bath, we know at this stage that that's not going to happen. Okay, that's not to say that we can't help them, but you need to, and also at this stage, I would like you to learn to identify red flags. Red flags, I have a German Shepherd and I want it to protect me when I'm out and about. Big red flag for me, I'd be walking away from that one personally. I would like my dog to wake me up from nightmares. Great if that happens, but we can't train for that. We can't ask a dog to be working day and night. So this is just examples of red flags where you are going to start to think to yourself, maybe I can't work with this person, or maybe I can't do what they want. Maybe their dog can't do what they want. And this is the time to get that information across to them and to set their expectations. If you have undergone a lengthy interview and a lengthy application, they are already going to be thinking that you can help them, okay? So please be aware of that information that you need right at the beginning, at the first point of contact. Is your client going to have a physical need or a mental health need? In my experience, the two are linked. There are invisible injuries without physical disability. I touched on PTSD, we've got all sorts of autisms, anxieties, depressions, etc. But as I say, in my experience, people with physical disability, certainly a physical disability that affects them on a day-to-day, long-term basis, will have a mental health runoff from that anyway. There's such a thing as the mental health scale, which again I will include in my slides for anybody that wants them. And it basically, it's a sliding scale that goes from healthy to ill. Okay, so you have healthy, you have reacting, you have injured, and you have ill. And we are all on this scale, okay? It would be lovely if we were at the healthy end, but we're not. We go up and down. Life events dictate where we sit on this scale, as does our genetic makeup, as does medications, etc. So it's important to understand that this mental health scale exists. And it's also really useful if you can, just for your own benefit, identify where your client is sitting on this scale. For example, if they are sitting in the injured and the ill section, they are going to be needing an awful lot more help than you and an assistance dog can provide. So it is vital that your client has the professional support that they need aside from you and aside from their dog. So they need to be under the care of healthcare professionals, a GP, a pain management team, whatever that physical side may be. And for the invisible injuries, they need a mental health professional, because you may need to make contact with that mental health professional. You will probably have to open a dialogue, because 50% of what is going on is completely outside of your remit. And it's important that you have support and that you have someone that you can speak to when it doesn't directly involve the dog and training the dog. So that's something that it's really important, and take a look at that mental health scale and get to know what's on it. The next stage will be actually meeting your client. Okay, you need that personal feel for one another. You need to like each other. You really do. This goes deeper than just a professional relationship, because you're going to find out more about this person than you would if you weren't training an assistance dog. Okay, so it's important that you have this mutual trust, this mutual like for each other. Then you can ask some slightly more probing questions. I would like you to think about ahead of time, before you meet this client or before you start branching off into assistance dog training, that you have some form of history that you want to know. So I would adapt your current history forms. Okay, take what information that you like to have anyway, and adapt it to what will be specific to an assistance dog user. Now, be very careful that you don't ask too much. I only ask how their condition will affect them training their dog and interacting with their dog. I don't need to know the whys. We do not want to bring up the past. The past is in the past, and all of their therapy will be about moving forwards. Okay, so the worst thing you can do is take them back. How they got to where they are doesn't matter. They may want to share it with you. Find a way of saying, let's move forward. Find out exactly what affects how they train, okay? So look at your history form and look at how you can adapt it. Every time you speak to a potential assistance dog client, you will find another question to put on there and one to take off maybe. So, hello Chantal from the Highlands, pretty far away, thank you for joining. So this is where we go, so that's where we're going to go next. We're going to have a meeting with this client. At every stage of the game, remember that you need to be setting expectations, okay? This is the time as well to think about what will exclude you from taking this person on as a client and taking this dog on. So I'll tell you my personal exclusions. I will not take on anybody who has been hospitalised for mental health reasons in the last 6 months. Okay, that's just what experience has taught me. I will not take on a client either for mental or physical help if they have unstable or unsuitable living conditions. If they are homeless or in a temporary accommodation, if they're in temporary housing, if they are living with people who have no interest in helping them and helping the dog, or living with people who are actively detrimental to the dog's well-being and the dog's training, so unstable or unsuitable living conditions, then I have some exclusions such as psychoses, delusions, dementia, a personality disorder, a diagnosed personality disorder is a big no-no for me, and active alcohol or substance abuse. These are all absolute no-nos for me. In my slides, I've got, I'll share with you a beautiful picture of a process of transition, recovering from trauma and mental health. And it's a lovely curve, and it shows acceptance, denial, anger, recovery, all of those things. And it's just a nice visual for you to take a look at. Again, this is not for you to diagnose where on this particular curve your client is or anything like that. It's just more information, and I just don't think that you can have too much. If your client is partially sighted, deaf, diabetic, there are charities doing that and doing that brilliantly. Do not, unless you are an expert, do not get involved in medical alerting. Do not put your name to that. Do not make these promises. Do not make that the primary focus of the dog. If further along the line we find the dog starts to alert, that's a bonus. That shouldn't be the reason that you start this. I appreciate that the charities have these waiting lists and everything else, but bear in mind there are reasons that we have specialist charities such as hearing dogs and guide dogs and medical detection dogs. So these are all things that I want you to think about, whether they go, you know, if they exclude you from working with this client. The next move, if you've decided that you'd like to work with this client and this dog and you see some potential in there for success, the next move for you guys is personal boundaries. It took me a long time to learn this lesson because I was so keen to help everybody that I didn't stick to my personal boundaries, and life gets very, very complicated, and both parties will suffer in the long run if these boundaries are not set and enforced, okay? So you need to be very, very clear in your boundaries setting and stick to them and be consistent in that. Set rules for the times that you are contactable and set rules for how you want to be contacted, okay? I'm happy to be contacted by phone, but what I do say is I won't answer after 6 p.m. and I may not answer on a Saturday and a Sunday, whatever, but do set them beforehand. The reason for this is a lot of disabilities, illnesses, etc., come with a certain amount of low self-esteem, paranoia, all of these things that make people think that they have done something wrong. If you have said, I will not answer your calls after 6 p.m. and you don't pick up, they know that. If on Monday you pick up at 6 p.m. and then Tuesday you don't, you again could potentially send this client into a tailspin. So please bear that in mind. Stay in your role as a dog trainer, stay there. That is all you are, okay? You are not a counsellor, you're not a marriage guidance counsellor, you're not all of those things that we get sucked into every time. It's more important than ever that we don't get sucked in this scenario, okay? Offer advice as a dog trainer, nothing else. Never, ever, ever offer advice on anything outside of training and care of the dog, okay? Never share your own personal experiences. I know that you want to let this person know that you do empathise. You may well have been there yourself. Like I said, we're all on this sliding scale of mental health. So we will have all been somewhere at some point, but do not share. This is not about you, okay? And this is not information that serves your client any good. They can see that you're empathetic and sympathetic by being professional. Okay, the reason the boundaries are necessary is they keep both of you safe, okay? They reduce the anxiety, like I said. They increase your well-being, okay? Those boundaries will make you as a trainer much healthier, okay? The boundaries, what they do is they set up a therapeutic environment, an environment where the client knows that when they have access to you, you have this therapeutic working relationship, okay? And it's underpinned by mutual respect. You respect your client's needs and they respect the fact that you have a life outside of helping them, okay? It avoids burnout, which is enormously common. I mean, you can only imagine. We know how common it is in the dog world anyway, in dog training, in behaviour, in the veterinary world, sadly, in the charity sector. So boundaries will help avoid burnout, okay? And also boundaries will stop you from adopting the rescuer role. It's such a role, it's so easy to fall into the role of rescuing someone, turning their life around, making their life worth living. And the reinforcement that gives you is very hard to turn down. Okay, so boundaries have to be there. Consequences of no boundaries. Potentially unsafe practice. It increases stress. It increases stress from the client as well as the trainer. Okay, if you don't have these boundaries, things can start to go wrong. Miscommunication will occur. It undermines the therapeutic relationship and it undermines your authority as well. If I say to one of my friends, "You're crazy, if you keep letting the dog jump up, it's going to keep jumping up," my friends turn around and say to me, "Yeah, I know." If I say that to one of my clients, they're like, "Okay, well, what do I do about it?" See the difference? It's really simple, but it will make everybody's life simpler. And most importantly, it will make the dog's life simpler, which is really important here because we can't turn around and say to the dog, "I'm sorry I did that. I shouldn't have done that. I meant to do this." We can't turn around and say that to the dog. If we've caused them inadvertent harm or stress or confusion, it's done and it can't be taken back. Additionally, if you don't stick to boundaries, if you don't stick to your role as a dog trainer, you will run the risk of compounding your client's difficulties. You will actually make their condition, especially a mental health condition, you can make it worse, okay, which is not why you've got into this in the first place, obviously. It's the polar opposite. Who sets boundaries? You do. As a dog trainer, you set all of the boundaries, okay? Remember that your client may have had life experience where boundaries have been compromised, okay, in the past. Or they may not be aware of the need for boundaries, okay? They also may not be able to defend themselves against boundary violations. These are all things that you need to take into consideration before you're going to work really closely with this person, okay? So you're responsible for setting the boundaries. You are responsible for maintaining the boundaries as the relationship develops. And I'm talking about access to you, social media, emails, meeting up, home address, all of those things. Have a real think about that beforehand. Hopefully, you're already doing all of this in your professional life anyway. My point is that it's even more important when you're dealing with the vulnerable. What is a boundary violation? Touching is a boundary violation. We need to be very, very careful. Best thing to happen to us in some instances is COVID, because we now have to take a step back, which is always a better thing to do when we're training a dog anyway. Receiving gifts, money and gifts from clients is very sticky. I would say a small gift of something. I've had lots of gifts that clients have made for me and they've been key rings or things like that. That's okay. I mean, common sense here. But what I don't want is £80 bottles of perfume and stuff like that. That's crossing a boundary, okay? A boundary violation would be having a dual relationship with the client, okay? So that would be having a relationship alongside the client-trainer relationship, okay? What that is can be, you know, use your imagination, but that will muddy the waters. That is a boundary violation, and that might be the time to involve a different trainer. Okay. Do not encourage the keeping or sharing of secrets. You don't need to know these secrets unless it really, really does involve the dog and the training. And self-disclosure and over-familiarity. You need to be skilled at turning the conversation back to dog training whenever you feel that boundaries are in danger of being violated, okay? There's what we call a zone of helpfulness. I have another slide for you to have a look at. You can become over-involved and you can be under-involved. Of course, there's the opposite to being over-involved with your client, which is not offering them enough. And right in the middle of those two is what's called the zone of helpfulness. And it's exactly what it says. When you are at your most helpful is when you are not under-involved and not over-involved. Before you start training, I'd like you to think about client chaperone, okay? I always call them a safeguarder. I'm not crazy about the word chaperone. Call them what you want, but I'm going to refer to them as a safeguarder, okay? This is somebody who is present during your training with your client, certainly in the beginning, okay? So certainly for the first few meetings, okay? It may be necessary to have them there throughout the entire process. So a safeguarder, who is a safeguarder? Well, ideally, they will be somebody that the client knows, the client is familiar with, and that the safeguarder is familiar with the client and the client's disability, the client's needs, okay? Perfect example would be the spouse of your client, the carer of your client, the sibling of your client, the adult child, anyone who can be there to help that client communicate with you, to help the client feel more comfortable. Their role is to look after the well-being of the client during your sessions. They have, in my experience, they are the people who have stepped in and said, I think he's had enough for a minute, because my client doesn't feel like they can say that to me. They feel like they're letting me down if they turn around and say, I need a break, I need to stop. Whereas the safeguarder can step in and do that for them. So that's what they are there for. They are not there to help you, and they're not there to help the dog, okay? You are there for the dog. That's your role. They are there for the client, okay? They also will ensure that these boundaries aren't crossed. As I say, they will facilitate communication. They're there to reassure the client, to make the client feel safe, to help them with their confidence. And also, they safeguard both client and trainer against unfounded allegations. Horrible to think that that could even happen, but it can, okay? Allegations of improper behaviour on both sides can happen a lot, and having a safeguarder there is going to help massively. So it's something that I want you to give real consideration to, and really try to make that happen, especially if we are dealing with a predominantly mental health diagnosis, okay? So some other considerations that may affect how you get on training this dog. Moving on from a safeguarder, or just expanding on that, there's a very real danger that carers, other family members, partners can become over-involved in the dog's training, okay? We have to be careful that they understand their role in this process, and their role is to support the client. It's not to get involved in the dog training unless they have to, okay? There's a real danger of this, let's say carer, this carer becoming more reinforcing to the dog than the client, which stands to reason. If the carer is the one that is able to run around the garden and throw a ball, if the carer is the one who is able to take the dog food out of the cupboard and put it on the floor, nature dictates that dogs will go to the person providing the best resources. So we have to be careful that the dog does not then become confused on who they are working for, okay? Because what this does as well is this hugely undermines the client. It undermines their sense of self-worth as they think, look, even the dog doesn't want me, okay? Which is not the case, but the dog is going to go to the person that feeds them. We know that. So how we deal with this is you need to ensure that your client is doing as much for the dog as they physically can, okay? If your client has severely limited mobility, it may be that the carer hands your client the dog's food and the dog can jump up and take it off them, or your client can even drop it onto the floor. We can find some way that your client can deliver the food if possible, okay? We can think about what games your client can play. Think, taking into consideration their mobility issues. The other thing we can do is that if your client is really severely limited in their mobility, what we can do is we can make sure that good things only ever happen in your client's presence, so that your client will become hugely valuable, even though they may not physically be delivering the ball or the toy or the food. These things are only coming out when the client is there and the client is talking to the dog and the client is interacting with the dog to the best of their ability. So you can see how we can still pair a severely mobilely challenged person, or whatever the word is. So yeah, so somebody with limited mobility can still be paired with nice things happening. We've all done it in the past. You already know how to pair good things. So that's just a way of, we just need to up that game a little bit around our clients who can't move and can't always be quite as reinforcing as we want. And this also will test your communication skills with the carer as you very carefully ask them not to provide the reinforcement. When we are asking a creature of any description not to do something, or there is something we don't want them to do, you will know exactly how to overcome that. What do? We provide an alternative behaviour that suits us better. So again, rather than saying to the carer, don't feed the dog, say to the carer, how do you think we can help the client feed the dog? Can you give the food to the client to give to the dog? Provide them with the alternative rather than saying don't do it. So partners, carers and family becoming more reinforcing than the client is a problem, okay? A lot of the people that you work with, in fact, probably all of assistance dog clients that you work with will be on a long-term medication. You don't need to know the ins and outs. Remember, I said to you, you don't need to know what meds they're on specifically. All you need to know is, do your meds affect how you learn? Do I need to change my training to help you? Okay, so we've got, the opioids for pain relief, okay? They cause sedation, drowsiness, they can cloud thinking, okay? You've got your NSAIDs, your non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, okay? Again, drowsiness and dizziness, lots of stomach upsets, lots of digestive issues can come with those. Your client may not wish to disclose any of this. They may not actually be aware of it because they've been living with it for so long. So it's up to you to just consider the effects that medication can have, okay? This might mean looking out for mood swings, okay? We're all different. After we've taken a headache tablet, my mood lifts as the pain decreases. So I want you to look out for things like that. And depending on what sort of cocktail of medication your client is on, these mood swings can go from the darkest of depressions to absolute euphoria. So that's something for you to manage from the dog's point of view. It can become very difficult you know, these opioids, these suppressants, it's very difficult for your client to find joy in some things, maybe. So remember that they can be harder to motivate than people working without disability. They cause weight loss and weight gain. Okay, both of those things will factor one way or the other into long-term dog training. Lack of sleep, sleeping too much, again. I think one of the biggest issues that you will have from medications is memory issue. The inability to either take in information, how much information they can take in will be limited, how they retain the information will be different, and it will be different every time you see them, okay, because their condition is unlikely to be completely steady. Okay, everybody has good days and bad days, whether you have a disability or not. So they can be fatigued, have really low energy, conversely be hyperactive. You know, some medications speed up the metabolism. They can exacerbate feelings of worthlessness, of guilt, of paranoia, as I said to you before, which is why those setting of expectations and setting of boundaries is so important. And it's very, very difficult on some meds to really think clearly, to make a decision. So remember that if you're asking your client to make a decision on something, you're going to have to give them lots and lots of information and lots of time in which to do that. You're going to be working with clients with all sorts of real differing abilities. Okay, that's just life anyway, isn't it? I mean, we in our day-to-day dog training deal with people with differing abilities. But one of the most important things that we can offer our clients, and that's all of our clients, is the ability to have some downtime and to have a break. Okay, all of your clients will need breaks, and lots of them. And as a really good dog trainer, you should want breaks for yourself as well. Okay. When we learn a new skill, and I have some nice slides for this, so don't worry if you can't remember it all. Learning a new skill involves actually physical rewiring of the brain. Okay. And what happens is the information has to cross from our short-term memory, where we've just heard this new information. It has to cross over into our long-term memory, which means that it stays there and we can call upon it at a later date. I don't know about you, but I know I've studied for 1 million tests, just enough to pass the test, and then forgotten it for whatever reason. You know, car theory test, for example, that type of thing. There are certain scenarios where, you know, you just need the information right now. You're not worried about having access to it at a later date. This isn't one of those times. This is one of those times where you want this information to stay in the long-term memory. Okay. If we don't cross over from the short term to the long term, the learning will be temporary, or it won't occur at all. Okay, so it's important that you recognise that. So if your client is suffering from insomnia and can't sleep, that's going to directly affect how they learn. So that's something you need to train for. Okay, the other thing that we don't do, and this is why we don't do it, in case you didn't know, is we don't begin training for another skill until the first one has been consolidated into long-term memory. Okay, so that's why we don't move on too quickly, because learning will be temporary or won't occur at all. So we need to get sleep. Dogs and humans need to sleep after a training session. Okay, if you don't sleep after a day of training, it's much more difficult for the brain to lay the learning down into the long-term memory. Okay, the other thing that works, that has the same effect, and that effect is not learning, is overtraining. So doing it too much. This is one of my biggest faults. I have such a desire to get information across to my client that I can often overtrain. Okay, and it's taken me a long time to learn not to do that. How do we consolidate the learning in real life. What does that look like in real life? What it looks like in real life is, obviously, we're not just going to teach our clients something and send them to bed. That's not going to happen in real life. So we have what we call waking consolidation, which is consolidating the knowledge so that it stays there whilst we're awake. Okay, and a waking consolidation is a break. It is a pause to have a drink. It's a pause to have a snack, maybe, because we might be dealing with blood sugars and energy levels, etc. We will need to adjust our position. We will need to make sure that we're comfortable. I have some physically limited clients who have to get up and move about. I have some that have to readjust their seating or their cushions, all of those things. A waking consolidation can look like a change of the subject, okay? So we say, let's stop there for a minute and talk about something completely different and completely benign, that allows for the processing to happen whilst the client talks about something that doesn't require much of their brain power. Playing with the dog, I mean, that's one of the best things, is to break for a little game so that both learners, both ends of the lead, can consolidate and take a break in the learning and the absorption of information, okay? So waking consolidation is lots and lots of breaks. Think about what's useful for your client. Think about what's useful for the dog. If you are working with a very small dog, you may not want to take lots of snack breaks because you're going to fill the dog up. If you are working with a border collie, you may not want to throw the ball for the border collie during the break in case it sends them into a different headspace. So give some thought to the client that's in front of you and the dog that's in front of you. And your best source of information is to ask them, let's have a break. Do you want this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do that? Okay. So waking consolidation is vital for working with people with limited ability, different abilities. Overcoming hurdles. I mean, how do we overcome the hurdles that an assistance dog client may pose? So we've got mobility limitations, okay? If you are working with a wheelchair user, you are going to need to make sure that that dog is completely habituated to a wheelchair, okay? Remember, electric wheelchairs move very quickly and very erratically. If you have the opportunity to spend some time in a wheelchair yourself, okay, and just get used to looking at the dog by your side from above, having a look at the space between the chair and the dog, how the chair moves, and also what you are able to do. How far can you reach? What can you hold in your hands if you're using a manual wheelchair? Do the same with crutches, with a walking stick or a walking frame. I have in the past tied one hand to my body so that I couldn't use it, just for my own benefit, because I wanted to see what my client was going through in those difficulties. And what it enabled me to do was to problem solve faster, okay? Remember, your client will have probably balance issues as well, okay? So it might be that you do a 3-minute training session with a dog standing on one leg. It can be as simple as that. You can then stop to think, I needed to break sooner. I needed to put my treats somewhere different. I needed to stop using a clicker because I just ran out of hands. It can be all of these things, okay? So I know that when I work with Dog Aid, they do this superb protocol called In Their Shoes, and we practice with mobility equipment, and we try to limit our own mobility to the best that we can. And with the mental health side, you are just going to use your best ability to empathise, okay? And your best people skills to get a read on how this person is best able to learn from you. Let's have a look at, so with dexterity problems, how is the person going to hold the lead? How are they going to attach the lead? Do they need to attach the lead to themselves, to their wheelchair? Is that a good idea for a start? That type of thing. Think about the equipment they can use. I want to talk to you about markers here. We know marker training is effective. I personally don't use clickers. The reason I don't is that there are some fabulous studies that show that using a clicker is no more effective than using a verbal marker, such as yes. So straight away, you can lose one piece of equipment, which is, to me, is always a bonus. Failing that, if you want to use a clicker, if you feel the dog is learning better with it, what type of clicker? You can get clickers that fit around the hand, so they don't have to be physically held. Clickers that attach to the wheelchair, so they can just be pressed. You can think about using a whistle, so the client can hold a whistle in their mouth. Attaching a very small piece of aquarium tubing to a whistle is a really comfortable way of keeping that in your teeth if your client is limited with their hands. Harnesses for the dog. Can the client get the harness on and off? If not, are they going to have help? Is it going to be practical to say this dog has to go into a harness? The use of carabiners, the use of all sorts of attachment. These are things that you are going to have to consider and overcome when your client has a physical disability. The other thing is delivering reinforcement. Now, what kind of reinforcement are you going to use? We have spent ages, when I've been working with disabled clients at workshops and training assistance dog trainers, the amount of time I've put into finding suitable treats is crazy. But what you need to think about is we all know about the value of the treat. We all know canine currency and what a dog's personal preferences are. So I'm not talking about that so much. I'm talking about being a little bit more practical. If your client has limited mobility, excuse me, we need to look at the size of the treat that they're offering. The size of the treat obviously needs to be appropriate to the size of the dog, okay? Or you're just going to get your little chihuahua after 5 minutes, he's going to go off for a nap because he's completely full up. So the size of the treat, the shape of the treat. Why does the shape of the treat matter? If your client is limited on how they can deliver it, they may need to be throwing a treat. Do we want a treat that sticks to everything, that sticks to their hands, that sticks to the floor, that they can't deliver in a timely fashion? Do we want a treat that when it hits the floor it rolls for 10 feet? That's not usually going to be very practical. If we want to position the dog and reinforce on a mat, this treat needs to land on the mat, stay on the mat. So think about the treats that you're using for your client and for your dog. Also think about a remote treat delivery service. Something like the Treat and Train is excellent, or the Furbo. A lot of these types of reward delivery systems, some can be voice activated if you have a client with no ability to press a button to reinforce. So have a look at that, Furbos, Treat and Trains, etc., for remote reinforcement or for effective reinforcement that your client can use. If your client has no physical disability and you are working with a primarily mental health diagnosis, then what kind of obstacles are you going to meet? You're not going to meet the same. You are going to meet obstacles that are more akin to absent-mindedness, memory issues, concentration problems, limited attention spans. Again, a lot of medications given to people with mental health diagnoses exacerbate these. You will also be dealing with lack of motivation, differing motivations on differing days, hyperactivity, underactivity, etc., etc. These are going to be more the obstacles you're coming across. How do we deal with those coming from a mental health perspective? First and foremost, and I will let you have copies of these if you want, although they really are the most basic documents, I use training diaries. I use a simple template which says what we taught, what treat we used, what we marked it with. Okay, so we used a yes or we used a clicker. If you want to make them a little bit more involved, you may add in some Ds. You know, what Ds did we use that day? What was the distraction we used on this particular session? And what distance are we working at? And how you feel, you know, any notes, any reminders, anything that your client wants to put down, so that when they pick this training diary back up 3 days later, they know what they were training, what they were using for a treat, what they were using to mark, and exactly how far they've got. I have a couple of examples of training diaries. One is very, very simple for people that aren't that keen on filling stuff in. One is a little bit more involved for those that are really into their training. Happy to give you slides for those, but they are the most basic template. So that's one of the things that I think is really important for all of your clients. I mean, even your non-assistance dog clients benefit from a training diary. Sessions have to be bite-sized. If your client books you for an hour, you probably will only be able to train for less than half of that. So what do you do with the rest of that training time in between the little 5-minute sessions? And this is where breaches of boundaries can often occur, because we cannot train 100% of that hour. You need to then think the best way to offer in breaks, but breaks that don't touch on boundary violations. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Lots of handouts. Have a very simple handout reminder to leave with your clients alongside their training diary. Bullet points, simple, okay? Use the least amount of words possible to get the point across, okay? Lots of reading, lots of studying, very tiring. And, you know, your clients may not be as academic as you are. They may not be as keen as in the whys and the wherefores as you are. Okay, if they are, great, explain it to them. But assume they're not, assume they just want a means to an end, and then you can always build on it. So handouts, make video clips, video your sessions, okay? If your client can watch back your session, there is nothing more useful than that, okay? Because what they can do is they can forward past the bits that they don't need to recap, and they can watch the bits that they don't quite get again and again and again. They don't have to keep asking you. They don't have to be embarrassed in asking you. Remember your not to use jargon, okay? Doesn't help anyone. The fact that they've come to you for help means they already think you know everything. You don't need to prove you do. You don't need to start touching on any kind of dog training jargon, unless, of course, you have a super intelligent client who really, really wants to get involved. Be very aware of the language that you use. This is where your communication skills from human to human will be tested to the max, more so than in any other situation you will ever find yourself in, okay? So stop and think before you talk. Stop and think that invariably this is a vulnerable person, okay? This is somebody that can misinterpret what you say quite easily, okay? The onus is on you to do that. What kind of tasks are you going to need? Well, retrievals, picking things up are two of the main things for physically disabled clients, okay? All of us, I think, it's good if the dog can locate something. So if we can send a dog off to retrieve something or find something. So pickups are pick up what's in front of you. So you teach the dog to pick it up and to hand it to the client. Retrieves are to get stuff that's a bit further away, and then searches are to actually go and find something. Useful things the dog can go and retrieve are medications in a secure little bag. Go and find them, go and bring the medication, bring the phone, okay? So you may want a nice phone case that the dog is happy, or something attached to the phone the dog is happy to pick up. Alarms and buttons, so targeting is a really big thing. Wheelchair users find it quite difficult to reach elevator buttons and buttons to cross the road. Also, it's good if your dog will hit an alarm when asked or when cued to do so. Grounding is a really nice one. So how are we going to get the dog to physically interact with the client? What is a safe way to do that, bearing in mind any physical limitations or physical injuries? It's no good asking your 40-kilo Labrador to jump up onto the lap if you have a stomach issue or that type of thing. So grounding, how can we get the dog physically applying pressure to the client in a safe way? Household tasks, that's all following on from your pickups and your retrieves, emptying the washing machine, passing it to the client, picking things up, toys, dressing and undressing, again, games of tug, teaching a drop so that the dog will pull sleeves off, pull socks off, that kind of thing. Even if your client is reasonably able, these are still beautiful bonding exercises and real fun to have. So you're going to need to go through with your client what they would like, what you feel the dog can do, and how do you go about those two tasks. You can train a dog. Don't worry about, can I train it to do X, Y, and Z? If you can train a dog, the answer is yes, absolutely. As long as that dog is physically able and wants to learn it, then you can. You can already do this. I know a lot of people put up a wall, dog trainers put up a wall to go, well, my client's in a wheelchair, I don't know how to teach a dog to walk on a loose lead. Yes, you do. You know how to teach a dog to walk on a loose lead. The fact that your client is in a wheelchair means that the process just has to be done more slowly, okay? Or you may have to use a different type of piece of equipment, but you already know what you're doing. Don't sell yourself short that because this person has different needs, you can't fulfill them. There are some things, I'm finished now, you'd be pleased to know. There are some things that you need to make sure that your training is, and that is that your training is impactful, okay? That your client goes, wow, that's amazing. I can't believe that I did that. You need to make an impact because it's very difficult for a lot of clients to retain information that's not interesting, okay? Show them what to do, show them that they can do it, okay? They are able to do it. Set your client up for success, exactly the same way that we all set our dogs up for success. Make sure that your learning is errorless by setting them up for success, okay? By ensuring that the client can't get it wrong. If you're not sure what to do, stop and think, well, what would I do if this was a dog? You have a human being in front of you that has a much higher ability to learn and can actually talk. So if you can do it for a dog, you can certainly do it for your client. So make your training impactful, make it errorless, okay? Make it so that no one's set up for failure, including you. Make it short, okay? Stop talking, take a break, short. Make it unambiguous, okay? This is for you to deliver information in the clearest, most concise way possible, okay? And generally be dynamic, be upbeat, be can-do, okay? This is what your client needs to hear from you. Yes, we can do this, assuming you can, okay? But you will have already set expectations, so this will be can-do stuff. My favourite thought I'm going to leave you with, and this is really, really important. I used to be a flight attendant, which is why I really, really like this one. Think of those oxygen masks in aircraft. When they fall down in times of need, what are your instructions? Fit your own mask first. If you are not working at your best, if you are not healthy mentally and physically, if you are overstretched, you are no good to anybody. Okay, fit your own mask first before anybody else. I hope I've given you food for thought. I will find a way of sharing a link to the slides, which will remind you, and please contact me anytime for questions. I'm more than happy to help anybody. So lots of love to you. Thank you for joining me. I feel very privileged that people have wanted to listen to me, and I will see you all soon. Much love. Bye.